All right.
Mr. Chairman, we are live on YouTube.
Okay, thank you, Clarissa, very much. With that, Clarissa, would you take roll, please?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Representative Baker.
Here.
Representative Brown.
Here.
Representative Burt.
Present.
Representative Henderson.
Excused.
Representative McGuire.
Present.
Representative Obermueller.
Here.
Representative O'Hearn.
Here.
Representative Stivar.
Present.
Chairman Burkhart.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Clarissa, why don't you, who is here on this bill? You've already told me, do we have any members of the public?
We do, Mr. Chairman. We have Director Reiner as well as Director Knopp, and then a couple other folks from YDOT as well. Do you have a preference on who you'd like to start with?
Well, do we have anyone who is not in an agency?
Yes, we do. We have Brett Moline and
Okay.
Kelly Little.
All right, so let's do this. Let's go ahead and admit everyone from the agencies. Just bring them all in, ETS and YDOT. Director, good to see you.
Good to see you, Chairman.
Finish admitting people. Director Knopp, good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Good afternoon.
Mr. Chairman,
Here on short notice.
everyone has been admitted to the meeting for the agencies.
Thank you, Clarissa. So, Director, do you or someone else on your staff want to take us through this bill?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think I would like to start the process and we'll work through it. For the record, my name is Luke Reiner, Director of YDOT. And Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, certainly a pleasure to be here today to talk about RIS. And I thought just because there's some new folks on the committee, we should spend a little bit of time on background talking this. So
Please, Director.
Thank you. This has been an issue that the legislature and actually YDOT and ETS have been working for years. In fact, it was the first issue that hit me when I came to YDOT about 2 years ago. And it deals with a 40-year-old Cobalt system that we maintain driver's license records and numerous other information on that's at risk of failure. And I'll let Mr. Rossetti and Mr. Knopp and Mr. Babbitt talk some details as we go through here. But the short story is that we've been working to fund the replacement of this system for a long time. And I, as part of that process, we contracted out to an outside vendor to help us through the process of what the replacement looks like. Their recommendation was to replace, and I certainly agree. And it's an expensive process, as you'll see in some of the details that we'll show you. But from my perspective as the director, it is time to replace this system because the risks of not get higher and higher every year. So before I turn it over to Mr. Rossetti and Mr. Babbitt and Mr. Knopp really to talk over some various perspectives, a couple of perspectives from the director I think might help paint this picture. First, I would certainly need to thank the interim committee for this bill, because this is a true committee bill. It was actually brought by one of the members of the committee to fund this system and the replacement of the system. And it was modeled after some prior year legislation. And what the bill does fundamentally is it raises vehicle registrations by $5 for every vehicle that's registered. And that, remember, that's the state portion of every vehicle, and which is by far the smallest part of a vehicle registration when you pay it, because most goes to the counties. And what it does, it raises about $7 million and to fund it incrementally over the years, the system. And so that's what the bill does. A couple of things perhaps to think about from my level is one, I appreciated the comprehensive approach that the interim committee took to long-term funding and some short-term funding for WYDOT, because there's really only two sources of revenue that you have when you start talking about WYDOT. One is fuel tax, two is vehicle registration. And so as you look at not impacting the taxpayer any more than necessary, a lot of time was spent on that. And so in this comprehensive approach and understanding the needs, really the approach of the interim committee was to say, let's do a small increase in vehicle registration to fund RIS. And then you saw what happened with the state with the recommendation for fuel tax to increase really the funding for roads, and then some longer term stuff such as tolling and a potential RUC. So that's sort of the from the 30,000 foot view, sort of the picture of the funding plan and sort of the intent of how these work together. And I appreciated that balanced approach. A couple other things from my level. One is WYDOT is one of many agencies in this state and one of many systems. And I'm very interested in being part of the solution. And I'm very interested in being part of the digital enterprise solution. And so to that regard, I really have to thank Mr. Knopp and his team at ETS, because we have worked very closely with them as we're developing solutions for this system. It did bring me a lot of comfort when the Barry Dunn report came out here several months ago and said that WYDOT has exercised due diligence in the process of working through, hey, what does a replacement look like for RIS? And so from the director level, I appreciate those words a lot. So really, my recommendation is that we continue, that we replace the system. This bill is a funding mechanism for that. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd really like to pass the mic to Mr. Rossetti to walk us through some of the background of this bill, just to expand the knowledge a little bit.
Okay, thank you, Director. Mr. Rossetti?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Taylor Rossetti, Support Services Administrator for WYDOT. I believe on Tuesday the 2nd, everybody on the committee, as well as Ms. Nord, received a short little 5-slide presentation that just kind of gives you some high-level background. That's really kind of what I'll walk you through here. I can certainly share that if you'd like, or we can just walk through it. It's your preference, sir.
Why don't you, Mr. Rossetti, why don't you share it with us so that those who are watching at home or other places can also see it?
Okay, sir. Should have a slideshow coming up shortly here. All right, can everybody see that? All right.
Yes, we can also, I can see it anyway.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Real quick, guys. So here's what the system is, and I think the important place to start here is, as Luke mentioned, we're one of many agencies, right? And what we're concentrating on here today is in those two blue bubbles, kind of in the middle. And you see you've got it listed as RIS Driver Services and RIS Motor Vehicle Services. What this demonstrates is some of the interactions with other systems and where other people interact with this system. So I think it kind of shows you, the impact of this system and really what the core is. A couple of things, to note here is, and I apologize for the coloring and the size of the text, but there's a lot of information here. There are a couple of key points where the Wyoming citizens come in, and part of that is when they come in for driver's licenses and identification cards. As you're aware, we're a real ID compliant state, so we manage those credentials so that they're good at any federal installation or for air travel. So that's a key point for the Wyoming citizens. And then there's an interaction between that system with the motor vehicle side of the house. And in Wyoming, the motor vehicle side of the house is demonstrated there on the right side of this diagram. And the counties play in a very important part here, right? I mean, we're all familiar with when we register the vehicles, right? We visit the county clerk if we need titling and treasurer if we're registering a vehicle, right? So the owners, have a touch point there to the counties. And then that information from the counties is fed into the RIS system. And then that's really where that information is shared with federal partners, for theft protection, criminal investigation, and things like that. So that's kind of the complexity here of that side of the system. There is also then a touch point here on the left side of that screen, Mr. Chairman, and it's a big bubble, and it's AAMVA. And what that is the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators. The reason that's an important link is that is an entity that a lot of the federal agencies partner with as an exchange of data. This is actually critical to like voter registration and where the Social Security Administration touch point is for this system. So we actually have, a partnership with the Secretary of State's office that then passes that information through to county clerks for voter registration. Commercial driver's licenses and things like that are also here. So that gives you a bit of a lay of the land of the current system interaction, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. I would say if anybody has questions as we go through this, just interrupt. And right now on the screen, you'll have to say something because we're sharing it. I have some technical difficulty seeing everyone. Let me see if I can do this. Okay, I can make it a little better. So there, yeah, but you may need to get my attention if you have a question.
Mr. Chairman, I saw Representative Brown's hand came up on my screen.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Taylor, just a quick question for you. You may touch into this in a little bit, but one of the things that I know the biggest concern is a drop off in service. And I heard, and I don't know if there's any truth to this, but I did hear that there was a glitch with the Secretary of State's office being able to grab some information just like a week or 2 weeks before the election. Can you verify that or let us know any system failures that have occurred that would have affected all of these particular agencies and how that was resolved?
Mr. Rossetti.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, looking at this diagram, it becomes pretty readily apparent that there's an awful lot of places where things can fail. There are some things that we will touch on here in a couple of slides, but one of the crucial things that ETS did do for us was they moved us off the state managed mainframe to a third party managed mainframe, which provided us some stability and some additional expertise in the mainframe component of the system. The outage that you mentioned there that occurred a few weeks was actually downstream in one of those federal partners. And it was just a glitch in the communication switch between the Social Security Administration, AMVA, and our system. It was a very short-term issue, but it was ancillarily related to the type of technology we're using there on the mainframe. There are, of course, more modern ways to communicate that wouldn't lead to those types of outages. But we have a dedicated team here at ETS, WYDOT, and then some third-party contractors that really are managing that to try to keep it up. We try to make sure that those outages are not for extended periods of time, but they do occur, Representative Brown.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Rossetti? Okay, Mr. Rossetti, I do have one at this point. I noticed a large bubble with vendors. Could you expand on that a little bit? Who are those and what do they do and that sort of thing?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, that's a great question. So there's a document at the federal level that protects people's personal information. It's the Drivers Privacy and Protection Act, DPPA. And what that allows is there are certain places where you need to aggregate some of this information. And one of the good examples here is like LexisNexis, which is a third party that does background checks and things, for people. So instead of say a large employer having to work directly with us or DCI or us and DCI in order to do a background check on an employee, you could contract with LexisNexis, who then would have a contract with us and DCI to get that information to conduct that service on your behalf. One of the other areas where this is very common is on commercial drivers. Employers have to do annual checks on their drivers' records, and they can do that with us individually, but these third parties allow them to do those in bulk. So that's just really kind of where those vendors fall in. We don't typically share that information for anything other than a purpose listed under the DPPA. So we're not in the business of selling that information for surveys or things like that. We're really looking at this as the third party administrators that are doing those services. Another bubble that's on there, Mr. Chairman, right next to that, if you can't read it, but it says Carfax. Carfax gets information basically because when a vehicle, say, is wrecked, goes into a yard, that information goes into a system, and then as a consumer protection, you can run a title search to see whether or not that vehicle's ever been wrecked. So that's really kind of the space that those vendors fill in this system.
Okay, Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two questions. The first question is, and I've asked this before, but just to ask it again for my own edification. Several years ago, when the Department of Health needed to upgrade their computers, and much of the driver of that was the federal government because they needed to extract information from our state system, they were able to negotiate a rather sizable grant from the federal government. Have we explored and asked for or tried to find help from the federal government with regard to upgrading this computer system?
Mr. Rossetti?
Mr. Chairman, Representative McGuire, yes, we do get some dollars from most recently Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. They do help us with some components of this system. Most of the large dollar amounts that were available on the federal side were really part of the Homeland Security things that occurred post 9/11. Most of those large sources have dried up, Representative McGuire. But we do participate in bits and pieces, $500,000 in order to maintain some of those connections. But in large part, we don't see the availability of big awards because most of this modernization is being done off of old requirements. It's not like a new requirement. It's just our system happens to be antiquated and we're trying to update it now. I hope that helps, Representative McGuire.
Representative McGuire?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That does help. And then the next question is, when we provide information to private entities, and you've mentioned Carfax and LexisNexis, do we charge them or receive any kind of benefit sort of a quid pro quo from them? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Rossetti?
Mr. Chairman, Representative McGuire, that is a good question. Yes, on the bulk side of things, they do sign a contract and they get their information, either quarterly, semi-annually, or yearly, depending on the type of information they get, and they pay a different rate based on that. But yes, that is managed by contract. It ends up being roughly $1.2, $1.4 million a year, kind of depending on the year. The other folks that do ask for this information, right, is the individual citizen, right? Sometimes if you're applying for a job, you have to provide your motor vehicle record. If you go do that, you come down and pay $5 to get your motor vehicle record. So we do charge a fee for that as well, sir.
Other questions? Okay, Mr. Rossetti, then I have a question on that. That being, are those fees that are being charged for, I apologize, I'm trying to work my screen here. Are those fees being charged? Do they pay for the services? Or are we losing money on a $5 fee to get your driver's license or your driving record?
Mr. Chairman, that's a great question here. So on the commercial side with those vendor contracts, most of those are standard reports. So those actually we do come out very, very good on. The individual at the counter, the $5 fee that like a person would pay on an individual basis. On the motor vehicle record, it's really hard to quantify, but yes, I would say on the motor vehicle record, if we were in a fee of around $10, it would probably be a little bit more appropriate. Where the question gets a little more complex is really on the title and lien search side. Some of those are very straightforward, right? A fairly new car, one owner, real easy to track. But you can imagine on a 40-year-old vehicle that's bounced back and forth from state to state to state to state, not all searches are created equal, sir. So I would say on those fees, there could be some ability to potentially charge a little bit more.
Okay, and Mr. Rossetti, that is not included in this bill, correct?
Correct, sir.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Rossetti, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess one of the things that might be ringing in your head, everybody's mind, is why is this the revenue information system? And really, it's not on this slide, but I think by way of background, and some of the folks have heard this, these functions were largely done at the Department of Revenue. And really what this was it was the way to collect revenue and collect the information. So revenue information system. In the early 1990s, there was reorganization of government. And at that time, these functions, so driver's licensing and motor vehicle tasks, as well as ports of entry functions, were moved to the department. And that's when we moved from the highway department to the transportation department. So that's really why that name RIS is still there. And it has caused some confusion. So I just thought I'd give you that. The director covered an awful lot of the rest of this slide here. But again, this was originally built in the 1980s. We have been able to modify and cobble things together over time. But as you can imagine, a 40-year-old piece of technology that is really resting on, a backbone of COBOL that I believe is, 20, 30 years older than that, is really what we're up against. We have noted in the past that we have limited intimate knowledge within state employees, people that understand the business side of this, as well as the computer side of this. And we are maintaining a good relationship with a contractor that's extremely knowledgeable here. And COBOL support is very expensive. One of the questions that we've been asked is, why don't you just hire some computer science folks, train them COBOL and have them come in? They don't teach COBOL much anymore, but that'd be tough. But a going rate, you're looking $180, $200 an hour on average for a person with this skill set in the market. So that just makes that very difficult for us. This is, as we mentioned, a very good partnership between WYDOT And I do want to applaud Enterprise Technology Services for moving away from that state managed mainframe and bringing in a third party to help manage that, just to give us some more bandwidth. Moving on to slide 3 here, sirs. I won't cover this in detail, but just so you guys are aware, recently a lot of numbers have been thrown out, and I want to explain a little bit why this cost keeps going up. So 2013, really, there was a lot of discussion, and I believe this was probably about the time the first bill hit the legislature that was similar to the one we're contemplating today. You know, the price tag at the time, I think we were asked, you know, what would it cost to upgrade the software? So, you know, we didn't take a terribly holistic approach at the time. And we basically answered the question that, you know, the market shows between 20 and $30 million would upgrade the software. Through analysis here at the department and with other people at the time, the idea that a commercial off-the-shelf product, if available, is the lowest risk. Again, what that does is takes advantage of other people developing a product and us figuring out how to make that work in our processes. Which just eliminates the opportunity to have to program every single aspect of a system. We moved through to 2015, and of course, at that point in time, ETS had been formed, and we were working with them to really flesh this system out a little bit more. You know, at that point in time, the price tag then had moved up to about 50 million. Part of the reason for this is it started becoming a more inclusive ask, right? We were starting to provide a lot more information, and the marketplace was becoming a little bit more mature, right? Other states were in the same position we were, and they were moving along with their projects. So that price did go up. At that point in time, between us and ETS, we identified that this was going to be a pretty big deal, and there might be 20 to 25 people amongst the agencies that were really going to be dedicated to this for a significant portion of their job for between 3 and 5 years as we move through that process, Mr. Chairman. If I can move then here to slide number 4, this really gets us to where the committee again started taking this up in great detail. We did bring in a third party to do some analysis for us based on the market at the time to continue refining this price estimate so that the legislature would continue to gain comfort with the numbers they were seeing. At that point in time, you know, again, that went up a little bit more, up to about 68 million plus. This though was for a 10-year life cycle, right? So we were trying to look at what would implementation plus, you know, a reasonable amount of time cost us. So that included, you know, additional detail, right? Software, hardware, maintenance, some of the preparation costs, you know, doing data analysis, business process analysis here internal to the department, and trying to work with the counties to figure out how their information from their systems could feed into this, and whether or not there's the ability to just use you know, a singular system. So at that point in time too, we were also able to identify that 20 to 25 core staff, based on technology and what we had going on, could be dropped a little bit. So we're still anticipating though that you're going to have a core team of, you know, 11 or so people that are going to be dedicated to this a significant amount of time. So there might be a need to do some backfill in those positions to remain operational, say in the driver services offices or the motor vehicle offices, in order to make sure this project is successful. So that started to be part of the equation as we were creating this price tag.
Mr. Rossetti?
Sure.
Question.
Sure.
The people you're discussing, the 11 employees, and you know the number prior to that, what will they be doing?
Mr. Chairman, that's a great question. And really what you've got is that's going to be a mix of technology people, you know, so people that can talk the computer language, and people that are the subject matter experts in like how to actually issue a license. So those guys would be, you know, partnered up together so that as a process is in there, if that has to modify our process, then the actual person that does that process can say, yep, that'll work. And here's the business process we need to modify in the way we operate. So that's really what it is you're going to have a technology component as well as a business system component. And those guys will just be working to make sure that the technology isn't changing the business and the business isn't driving the technology, so that those two things are being done together.
Okay, Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and you segued into a concern that I have, and I know that we will have outside, out-of-state consultants, et cetera. I think it's going to be important to keep in mind, and if you can break out for us how much money will stay in state and how much money is going to go out of state as we implement the new system. So thank you very much.
Mr. Rossetti?
Mr. Chairman, Representative McGuire, at this point, it would be very difficult for me to split that out. But as we continue to move through this project, I'll try to keep that in mind as we're talking about those staff. I mean, of course, most of the staff, the actual state staff are here in the state, but some of those third parties are, as you mentioned, outside the state. So I can't answer that question for you at this moment, but as we procure it and keep going forward, I could absolutely report on that for you, sir.
Okay, Representative Stiver. Representative Stiver, you're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This looks like a rabbit hole to me. You go back and look at the IRA system that Department of Health, another department was doing in the state a few years ago. They abandoned it after spending millions and millions and millions on it. I don't know the exact cost, but it cost the state quite a bit of money. Have you guys looked at what other states, their software systems and what they're running on?
Mr. Rossetti?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stivar, yes, that's really what the driving factor on a lot of these price tags are. And again, that's where that designation of COTS really kind of comes in. That is a commercial product that's been developed and implemented in other states successfully that then we would want to be bringing in here. That's exactly the approach we're trying to take here as we move forward. Again, that was identified as the highest opportunity for success for us as we move forward to implement this. So we're not getting into customized systems. I hope that answers your question, sir.
Okay. Mr. Rossetti, please proceed. And Representative Stiver, if you would turn your hand off. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Really, then I wanted to go on and let you know that, in 2018, we didn't stop. So moving forward, we've continued on doing a lot of data analysis, business analysis, trying to communicate with the counties, working internally with ETS to make sure that we're setting this thing up to be in the best shape for success. We've done a lot of the technical business requirement gathering. We're working on a draft request for proposal to be sent out. That's been multidisciplinary, across the WYDOT units, ETS. We're trying to work with counties to figure out what requirements they might have. We're doing a lot of exploration as what that interface with their systems looks like. And then as part of this as well, right, we've seen over time the cost of these systems continues to go up. To Representative Stivar's previous question, we asked to have another analysis done here in 2020, and that cost across the country is sitting about 80 million roughly to implement a system that does the driver's license, the motor vehicles, and then some of the business licensing that we're in. So again, we just keep trying to refine that number so that everybody's aware of what we're on. And then I believe Director Reiner did mention that this project approach and analysis was part of the LSO consultant review that was done by your guys' third-party consultant. And I believe that that review did mention that our approach was solid and that they encouraged us to continue working with ETS as we went through to completion here. Mr. Chairman, with that, that really, I think, was what I was prepared to discuss here. I think it now probably likely gets into the technology side of things, which is, Director Knopp and Mr. Babbitt would probably be better to tread in that water, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. And I didn't see in what order the hands came up, so I'll go with Representative Obermuller first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Taylor. I just have a question on when you relate this to the new fee structure. Just want to make sure what that fee structure is designed to do. So is that basically designed to, it's set at a price that'll cover the next 10-year cycle, including inflation in that period of time? And just kind of explain how that fits together here in terms of how we pay for this. Thank you.
Mr. Rossetti?
Sure, Mr. Chairman. Do you mind if I stop sharing my screen so I can see everybody?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you, sir. So, yeah, if you look at the way that the bill is set up right now, and I think that the key here is probably to go ahead and look at that fiscal note, Mr. Chairman and Representative Obermuller. Sorry, I didn't go through you, Mr. Chair. I think if you look at the way that fiscal note is set up, we estimate that right now this would generate around $7.3 million a year. Obviously, at that $80 million price tag, we're estimating it's about $8 million a year. So it is very close to covering the cost of this going into the future, Representative Obermuller. One thing I would say is that once we have implemented, we do have expenses right on the current system, right? We're spending money to maintain the current system, and that right now that's between $1.2 and $1.4 million a year. That is money that we allocate annually in our existing budget to keep this system running. And once this new system comes in, that money then becomes available in the budget to continue to augment this fee structure. So as presented, the bill generates on an estimate of 7.2 million. After you figure what we're already spending on our existing system, we're comfortable that this bill would accomplish what we need at least for the next 10 years.
A follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Please.
Tell me again about just the original cost of the purchase. I mean, how does that fit into this? There's a
Mr. Rossetti?
the original outlay for it.
Sure, Mr. Chairman and Representative Obermuller. That is a good question. So as we've moved through this, part of that ends up being a procurement strategy, right? We could put this out to vendors and say, hey, we're interested in an implementation strategy as well as maintenance and ongoing costs for 10 years, and we'd like to amortize that in equal payments, right? So if we do an RFP that way and the vendor agrees to that, that structure would be in place. The other thing that you could do is front load the implementation and then the cost decrease over time. My understanding of the bill as the way it's presented, right, is that, it goes into effect and that money starts accumulating and can't be spent for anything other than this. So there was also the opportunity to have a build of some funds prior to the actual expenditures occurring. So we can take that into account as we do the procurement strategy, and we'll work with ETS to determine, what strategy is best based on what we know from the vendors, right? The 10-year over time equal payments, they potentially are taking on a little bit more risk than they would be otherwise. But if we front load the costs and then have lower costs on our end on the back end, we'll have to shift monies internally in order to cover the upfront costs and be reimbursed on the back end ourselves. So that will largely be determined at the end of this. But again, as structured, we're pretty comfortable over the course of 10 years that the state ends up being whole, I guess, is what we're looking for.
Okay.
Representative Mr. Chairman, thank you. That's it for now. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Taylor, I'm hoping you can help me out here because I'm mostly in favor of this bill. But when I look at the price difference, not necessarily just since the first time I heard this, but just since 2018, the price has gone up by 20% just since 2018. I go look at inflationary rates since 2018. We're like 2%, 0.5%, 1%. Where in the world did we come up with a 20% increase in just 2 years for the same system?
Mr. Rossetti?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown. Yes. The way we arrived at those numbers was a true assessment of what's going on with other state agencies that are implementing these types of projects. Now, there is another interesting thing that's occurred since 18. A couple of additional vendors have entered the space, but the prices of those solutions has not come down. And the one thing that I can say that is a variable here that we can't really quantify, right? We're aware we're a small state, small population. I think one of the disadvantages we have to that is that still the core of our system has to be very comparable to what it's going to take to do, say, a large state that might be on the West Coast with 25 million people, right? So at its core, there's not a lot of economy of scale. But those numbers that are there, Representative Brown, were really done through survey of the public information available to us as we looked at other states and how they implemented these projects. So many of them are higher than that, and many of the states did it in different phases so that one phase might be less than that. But the $80 million number is really the number we're seeing if we go full-blown implementation and look at a 10-year cost cycle.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Brown?
All right, Taylor. So I appreciate that. I'm going to be kind of blunt here. How sure is WYDOT that $80 million is not going to go up by another 20% in another 2 years because we forgot to survey this particular portion or that particular portion of the public or the state agencies? If we go back and look at your slides, I believe the starting one was 57 million. We're up to 80 million. We've almost doubled in cost in 4 years. I'm really concerned with the cost that's going up. And what I don't want to see happen is I don't want to raise these taxes, get the money, and then have WYDOT come back to us in 4 years saying, well, we actually need 132 million. How certain are you guys that this price point is what you guys need?
Mr. Rossetti?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, that is a good question. And obviously when it comes to procuring anything, whether you're building a building or doing a computer system like this, there's a certain amount of uncertainty until you open those envelopes, right? What I can say is that this has been done through a comprehensive survey of what's going on in the environment. And I think what it would speak to is the how crucial it is to start moving and trying to save for this project now rather than later. The one thing I can say is that, once the RFP is released, once you've gone through negotiations, you're locked into that cost. The prep work that we've done up front, working with ETS and trying to build those business requirements is really where the focus has been to ensure that the error that you highlighted does not occur. We've also been trying to ensure that we have an ability to work with the counties to ensure interfaces are set there. We're continuing to work through that. But we're continuing to monitor the environment and set up the best strategy we can to move forward to be successful.
Okay. Representative Brown, you good? Representative Stiver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question I have is House Bill 219 and House Bill 218 back in 2017. You guys raised all the registration fees and license fees for the same issue we're doing now. Is that correct?
Mr. Rossetti.
Mr. Chairman, I'll take an initial stab at that, and then Director Reiner may want to kick in, but and Representative Stivar. That fee swap back in 2017 actually did raise those fees. However, at the same time, there was a pullback of general fund allocations to the department. That did not lead to a net revenue gain for the Department of Transportation during that fee increase.
Okay.
All right, now I think Representative Brown was shaking his head. He was here, I wasn't. I'm going back looking.
Representative Brown, go ahead if you want to answer that.
Mr. Chairman, the fees that we updated, and honestly, if I remember right, one of those bills actually ended up failing. We didn't end up passing one of them, but it's exactly, they both passed. Okay. I couldn't remember for sure, but it looks like Director Reiner's got some information here too, but those were in an effort to balance off the change away from the general fund. And that was in an effort to come off of general fund for YDOT, where YDOT was on their own funding and no longer being required to come off of general fund. That was joint appropriations that came up with that concept, and that's where those fees came from.
Thank you, Representative Brown. Director Reiner, do you want to add something there?
Mr. Chairman, and really to what Representative Brown said, is he's correct. I mean, the fees were raised in that time frame as we came off the general fund. And so, and in the end, there is actually a net decrease for YDOT in terms of available funds. And so that's the history there. As you go back to sort of the opening comments, you know, there's a lot of discussion about, hey, is this an appropriate fee to raise? And really the discussion was at this point, trying not to affect the residents who pay this minimally. And so that was the funding choice that was made by the committee as they looked at options, was a $5 increase here. Now, in full recognition that it was increased a while ago.
Thank you, Director. Representative Burt.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for your knowledge and the information you bring. Mr. Rossetti, I got a question. You'd mentioned something a couple of times about trying to work with the various counties and their system. If we go through and bring this system in, does this automatically, or will this update the county systems as well? Or are the counties going to be on the hook for updating their system in order to make this work?
Mr. Rossetti?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Burt, you know, that is a great question. One of the approaches to this is to try to build in the ability to interface with the counties, right? The counties, and I don't want to speak in great detail for them. I believe Ms. Little's on the call and can probably highlight that a little better than I, but they use multiple systems. So not all the counties are using the same system. And one approach to this could be going through to do, you know, one system that would update everybody. But again, those are decisions that are impacting to those elected officials and those entities at the county level that really are a little bit outside our purview. So we would be interested in doing one system if that worked for everybody, and we would try to build that into the original project budget and pay for it out of this allocation. An additional approach to that could be simply going forward with ours and building into this budget interfaces with the existing county systems. And that's really kind of what you're looking at here with that $80 million figure, is anticipating having to build interfaces so that the counties can work their same systems. At the same time, we're not stopping there, Mr. Chairman and Representative Burt. And this is another credit to Director Knopp. We're actually circling back to try to have some additional discussion with the counties and see, are there ways that we can assist them in making a decision on whether or not it's right to move forward with one system for everybody, or if keeping their systems and interfacing is the right thing. So it was a long-winded answer, but I thought there was some utility in having some discussion and background there. As presented, this is anticipating interfacing with their systems.
Okay, Representative Burt.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, just to follow up. So if the state's going to update its entire system, are the counties already already have the ability to, or will they already have the ability to work with the new system if the state system's so antiquated and so old, and the county system's already built in to work with that so they can communicate back and forth? If I imagine we're looking at, increasing or updating the technology for 40 years past. Or is it a possibility that the counties themselves can have issues, communicating back and forth with an antiquated system versus an updated system? And if there is, if there's a possibility of that, where would that cost come from? Are the counties going to, be responsible for their cost, or how's that whole process work without having an information, bottleneck on not being able to make that all that information back and forth.
Mr. Rossetti?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, and I can answer that from our perspective, Representative Burt. So the situation that you described does exist currently, right? So the counties are currently sending information to us from their systems to our system. And that occurs a couple of different ways through file transfer protocols and things like that. So not every county is doing it the same way. And yes, there are some communication issues there. That's really where, as you move forward into the modernization, that you start building those interfaces. So really right now, there's limited ability for, say, a county down here in the southeast corner of the state to communicate with one that's maybe more on the central southern part of the state and share information there, really without engaging staff here in Cheyenne to be able to go in and look at, say, a title. So if you were moving from one county to another, there's some limited ability for the counties to go into this system and check those records now. As you move forward into a modern system, that's one of the things you're absolutely trying to address here, is allowing a little bit more self-service amongst the counties and better data exchange between the counties and us, and then ultimately to the federal partners and people that we have to share that information with. So yes, the modernization is meant to help processes on our end as the state, but also assist the counties in having better and more ready access to information for their purposes as well.
Okay. Representative Burt, anything else?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, if I can.
Go ahead, please.
So I guess the question is, who covers that cost at the county level if there needs to be, an updated, if they need to update their systems. And anytime we can move information back and forth, if I move, counties, obviously, I enjoy the convenience of having that happen, at a click of a button. That's where we're at in technology days. But if the counties are already strapped for funds, which we're already seeing with emergency services, which we've heard the past couple of days, as well as other county agency services such as inspections. We just heard through inspections. If the counties are already strapped for funds the way that everything everybody else is, if they have to update their systems, where does that cost come from? Do we have to come back and increase our fees again to cover the county cost? Or how does that, I guess I'm not seeing it. Once we build the state system and we have a problem, if it shows up to where the systems don't like to read each other because one's old and one's new, are we going to come back in another meeting somewhere and say, well, now that the state's spent this kind of money, the counties have to spend this money? And I look at the long term is, the $80 million is for the state system, but yet now, are we going to put an unforeseen burden at the county levels in order to make the whole thing work, in the grand scheme of everything? So that's kind of where I'm looking at and trying to wrap my head around it on the long term of it all.
Mr. Rossetti?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Burt, that honestly is one of the questions that we've kicked back and forth, right? So there's a couple of ways to approach it. One is one system for everybody, and then the costs are just covered underneath the one contract. There's practical considerations there, right? The counties are using just a component of this system, right? They're doing the vehicle registration part. But their systems could be involved in property tax assessment and things that are really outside the scope of this system. As presented at this $80 million, really what we're trying to do is look at what systems the counties are using, building those interfaces as part of this initial budget, and then having that feed into our system. So if 5 counties are using the same system, the idea would be is that interface, the counties could interface there, that would face into our system, and that would be the connection point between those systems and that. And right now, the hope would be is that would be included in this original budget. Now, there's decisions that then get made in the future, right? So if a county decides to go to a different vendor, they may have some cost implication there. Or if there's changes that need to be done in order to make the system work better for the counties, then there is some discussion as to who would foot that bill. And that really those discussions are, I think, what Director Knopp and us are going to be trying to do here starting the middle of February to really figure out what is the long-term vision for IT for the state, and how does that mesh with the long-term vision for the counties, right? So that we're not here in 2 more years asking for another $80 million. So right now, the $80 million as presented, we're anticipating a reasonable amount of interfaces with the existing county systems to interface with our systems. What happens with county decisions going forward, I really can't speak to, Representative Burt.
Mr. Rossetti, to follow up on that a little bit, about how much of the 80 million would go for the interfaces with the counties?
Mr. Chairman, what I'll have to do is dig into the details of that. The number that came to mind to me was between 250 and 500,000 per interface. But again, that's not having full technological specs on both ends of it. So again, that's a lot of variability, but we're looking at probably $2.5 million anticipated in that budget, if I were to venture a guess.
Okay. Other questions?
Representative Stibar, can you mute your microphone, please?
Representative Stibar, could you mute your microphone? Thank you. So, modern technology. So any other questions right now for the department? Okay, so Mr. Rossetti, Director Reiner, please hang with us. Director Kopp.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I'm Gordon Knopp. I'm the Director for ETS. Thank you for having me today.
Okay. I think we've had most of a presentation. Do you have any remarks you'd like to make before we ask you some questions?
Not at this moment. If it's okay, I'd like to field the questions first, and then I may have some remarks based on the questions.
Great, thank you. So any questions for Director Knopp? Representative Brown.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, good to see you. Quick question for you in regards to something that Taylor had said a few minutes ago, and I just kind of want to get your guys' perspective on this, is the draft RFP that you guys have started working on. It's my experience with ETS that, you know, the RFP process can take a very, very long time. What has your guys' input been on that, and how comfortable are you with the process of the RFP going out and making sure that we are getting the qualified candidates responding to this particular RFP?
Director Knopp.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, thank you for the question. I would say that depending on the level, ETS has been involved with the RFP creation since the inception, which was 9 months ago-ish, something like that. A draft has been provided, which we have been reviewing in detail. With something this large, there's so many components. As we brought in, to give you an example, right there was a discussion for 3 or 4 weeks on just the mainframe transition, right? So the mainframe people were involved in that, and then we had discussions with the driver services folks. So waiting until you see the bigger picture is also important, right? Because sometimes as you work in each silo, you sort of don't see the big picture. So we are in the process of the big picture review at this moment. And as far as my comfort level, I have a high comfort level that once we finish the review process, this RFP will get us a good bang for the buck. And that's the goal that we have here, is not only to get the best possible system and the best valued system for the state as far as this functionality is concerned, but to also position it for future use across the enterprise, position the system for future use across the enterprise. And what I mean by that is, as the new RIS is stood up, and whether that happens in 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, whenever that is, that houses a lot of information that right now in other agencies, they duplicate. Right now I can't change that today, But once the new RIS is stood up, and if we include the interoperability, which are the interfaces that allow it to exchange data, then if we have another agency that needs to replace or update their system, and we know that, I'm just making this up now, let's say 80% of the information in that other agency's system is already in RIS, well, we don't need to build such a robust system in that new agency. Maybe we just need to collect the missing 20% and then get the rest from RIS, synchronize it, and that's where we'll start to see the traction moving forward. And that's part of what we want to build, make sure is built into this RFP, is to hold the vendor accountable, whoever that's going to be, that's going to provide this service, to make sure this is a system that we can leverage into the future for years to come. And with that, right, there's a technical piece, but there's also data privacy, and there's some other concerns that we want to make sure we take we want to get all the wording there up front, because what I don't want to do is try to chase my tail afterwards. I'm too old and out of shape to chase my tail that way. So I want to do it up front so we don't have to do that. Pardon my poor analogy there.
Representative Henderson.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I had problems earlier. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to ask why we have so many critical information systems confined within and dependent upon one information technology, functional hardware setup, software too, I guess, called RIS. But I don't want to ask that. What I want to ask is have we identified the best solution going forward with this RFP that we're talking about? Is this the best next step to fix the problem with regard to what we had with COBOL? Or are we going to set ourselves up for this again down the road? Please, thank you.
Director Knopf.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Henderson, thank you for that question as well. What I would offer is, I believe that is the case, that we are setting ourselves up for the future in the best possible manner. And by that, what I mean is we want to make sure that we're not recreating another silo that 20, 30 years from now, we won't be able to support. And we're singing the same song and dance we're singing now, right? So the platform, two things are coming into play to help us with this. One is technology is becoming more standardized, right? Back in the 60s and 70s when this stuff was coming out new, and even quite frankly into the 90s, it was pretty much the wild, wild west, right? You go and build something because you could, but these platforms and these data architectures are becoming more standard, and interoperability is something that everybody is facing. And so I believe because that is coming up, that interoperability is increasing and the platforms and the data exchanges are more common, that will help us. But also we're more proactive about that in the architecture of the RFP and how we want to see it built. And so what I mean by that, if I can give you a little bit of a detail here, there's a number of approaches that we could take. And what you heard Mr. Rossetti mention from the consultant, I happen to agree with. And that is, you can look for what's called a commercial off-the-shelf system, right? It's pre-built and we'll need to configure it, right? So it does the things that it needs to do, but we don't have to build it from scratch. Now, the current system was built from scratch with a team of developers back in the day who coded everything by hand. And when you do that, you have to document the process as well. You have to document the code well, all these things that as a society, a technology society, it wasn't done well back in the 70s and 80s. And so now we're sowing what was reaped back then, right? There wasn't a lot of that architecture around it. Today, that's what we're putting the language in there, right? That we will have an ongoing support. So I hope, did that answer your question, Representative Henderson, or did I just go on a rampage in a different direction?
Representative?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the answer. I mean, everyone could say, well, how'd we get here and that kind of thing. But, I'm more interested in making sure that we aren't spending more money chasing the wrong solution. Technology is where it is, and technology is going to change. So I think we have to be agile in our fiscal decisions so that, we can change as we move forward, because we're always going to have multiple counties and multiple processes coming together. But we don't want to set up kind of like a train yard where you have a turntable and all these things, all these tracks lead into that turntable, and nothing can happen if that turntable doesn't work right. And that's what I'd like to avoid. Wouldn't you agree?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Henderson, yes, I would agree. And that's why as we look at a statewide data architecture, that is what we'll be looking to avoid, is to have some form of redundancy and not having single points of failure, or I should say reducing single points of failure. I'm not going to claim that we're going to eliminate them, because sometimes they're going to exist despite our best efforts.
Okay. Representative Obermuller.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Director Knopp, thank you for being here. In this space, I'm glad to hear that you're going in the direction of these commercial products rather than proprietary. And those products now in this day and age have to be flexible and move with the times, and they will. It'll be costly to keep up with it, but it's a train we do need to get on. My question is on, as far as the vendors that are out there, do you have any sense of how many players there are in this space, or whether there's going to be some really competitive environment here? Thank you.
Dr. Knopp.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman Burkhart and Representative Obermuller, thank you. Looking at the research that has been provided to us by MathTech, which is the consultant that WYDOT consulted with and has done the research with the other states, I see from their report, I believe 7 vendors that have successfully completed these projects. Now, I say that because a few of those vendors took a swing and a miss, meaning they did a project in a state and it wasn't successful, and then they finished up another project. You know, they had simultaneous projects, one failed, one succeeded. We can talk philosophy later. I just want to be upfront with that. And I'm just not a big fan of, a 50-50. There's a few vendors that have taken swings and done this repeatedly in other states, right? And then there's some vendors who have, a couple of vendors have taken multiple swings and had all of them be failures. And those vendors have stepped out of the marketplace. So it's good to identify those things. And there have been a few vendors now that have brought their flag into this camp, so to speak, and said, gosh, oh golly, we can do this too. But I would ask for your consideration on this, that with a price tag this big and a product this big, I am not a fan of experimenting with somebody who claims they can do it, no matter how big the company is. And the reason I say it that way, I've been around long enough to watch the IBMs of the world, who were massive companies, come in and say, we can do this. And this is back in the day, right? I don't want to reflect on current IBM. And they come in and say, we can do this. And then, best of intentions, they don't quite make it through. And that's, I'm talking historically, there's, we've got lots of computer companies or technology companies we could name. So I hope that makes sense. Now, of the 7, not all of them provide the same type of solution, right? So not all of them do commercial off the shelf. Some of them do custom build, which again has some inherent issues with it when you custom build. So the intent right now with the RFP and the discussions, as Mr. Rossetti has shown, is to look for a commercial off-the-shelf system. And so when we whittle it down to there, I believe we're looking at 5 vendors who have done that successfully in other states. And to me, it's important that we look for people who have done this before. It's not their first rodeo. Did that answer your question, sir?
A follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Obermuller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, in that regard, I'm just going to kind of make a statement about it that you can agree or disagree with, but you know how tough it is to come to the legislature for money. And so when you get into these negotiations and you find that the best product is more than you've asked for here, I guess my recommendation would be to come back to the legislature and say the best one is this and we need more money, than to try to make do with what you asked for in the first place. So that's all my comment, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director Knopp.
Any other questions for the director? Any other questions? Okay, Director, I have a few. Right now, about how many other agencies are tied into the RIS system, and about how much usage do they make of it?
Just one moment, sir. I'm going to scroll to a different piece of information so I can hopefully give you an informed answer. Because I suspect you're looking for something more technical than bucket load. And I would ask Taylor if he's still on the line. He might be able to help me with this on the number. I'm literally counting from that spider chart that you saw earlier.
Director, just an estimate is fine.
Yeah, I'm looking right now. It looks like about 15 agencies, and that use is going to vary. Some agencies get information out of there constantly. As an example, well, and Taylor, you can help me with this, right? I believe HP is an example. Highway Patrol are in there 24/7 getting information. Other times it's a once or twice a week, depending on who they are. Taylor, can you send me can I phone a friend on this?
Yeah, yes, you can get a lifeline.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Rossetti.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to opt out. Yeah, you know, as the director mentioned, the utilization, it becomes pretty complex, right? Law enforcement in general, Highway Patrol, County Sheriff, City PD, they're getting information out of other systems, but that information is generated here, right? So if they happen to pull you over on your way home and they run your license plate through their system, that information is coming out of RIS. It's fed from the county that registered you into RIS, and then it goes into the law enforcement systems and comes to you. So those guys are in it all the time, as the director mentioned. You've got other agencies, like one that might be involved in child welfare or the health of our folks. Those guys use this information for other things. Child support investigations can get in here and try to get some information. Just tracking down people for benefits, fraud detection, you know, so that's going to ebb and flow depending on what's going on in the state. But that, I think Director Knopp answered it pretty well. It varies significantly. And you may even hear from Ms. Little that the county's utilization of these systems varies significantly depending on the size of the county and their familiarity with how it operates. So it's important for multiple agencies. And the utilization's difficult to quantify depending on what's really going on at the time.
Okay, so I guess where I'm going with that is, are the other agencies, and let's talk about state agencies. I look at the Highway Patrol as part of WYDOT and that, but say the agency that deals with child welfare and that, are they contributing to the system? Are they contributing to the cost of the system? Mr. Rossetti?
Mr. Chairman, right now, the contribution on checks like that it largely resides on how much time they spend on the mainframe. So they are paying the enterprise cost of that. So as they're sitting on that mainframe running a query from their system into our system, that sits there on that mainframe, and the time they spend there is being charged out through agreement with ETS. So that is being quantified now, yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Rossetti. That's what I was looking for, that they're all paying their fair share. I mean, because to me, and I'll go to Director Knopp, it looks to me like in some ways WYDOT is having to run a system that's kind of supporting the rest of the state or a lot of state agencies. I can understand the interaction with, say, other states, and there's that reciprocity, and I don't think it's a good idea to start trying to charge each other for usage and for information. But within the state, I mean, if we're keeping state financial records on this system, I think that the system should be paid for by those agencies. And I really don't like the idea that WYDOT may be running a system that is supporting the rest of the state. And correct me if I'm wrong with that, and I might not understand the complete arrangement. So if you could address that, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair, to read or to try and rephrase what I believe Taylor was trying to share, or Mr. Rossetti. Right now, the other state agencies are paying for the use of the mainframe, and they pay for the mainframe technicians, their use to support that technique. Now, whether or not those people are paying for the maintenance and support of the staff inside of WYDOT that helps run RIS, that's another conversation, right? And the counties put information into that. I don't think there's a payback to counties as they put information into that. I believe at this point that is primarily run through ETS and is based on utilization of the mainframe. And the ETS staff, current ETS staff, are paid through that breakdown through an enterprise approach. However, I don't think that's the case with the county folks or the WYDOT folks who are putting their efforts into this.
Okay, thank you. So I guess a couple more questions is the proposed bill would raise roughly, I'm just going to round it off and say $8 million a year against an $80 million system. That takes 10 years to pay that system off. In 10 years, wouldn't the system already be obsolete at the current rate that technology is changing? Director Knopp?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. If we did the custom development and put it onto a platform that wouldn't be continually updated, then the answer would be yes. So in other words, if we built another RIS in the same manner in which it was built years ago, that would be the case. However, with the RFP as structured today, we are looking for it to be more of an adaptable, ongoing system that will be able to be maintained and configured as future needs or future technologies come about. So with that, I think the term paid off in 10 years is a bit of a misnomer. So the 80 million, the way it's projected right now, that would pay for the first 10 years of the service. Now we would continue paying for the service beyond those 10 years. What that's going to look like, I don't have an answer, right? My fuzzy crystal ball, which, we know how good that's going to be. I would think as we move forward, the ability to manage the data and run those systems is going to become more cost effective because and that may seem counterintuitive because you just heard testimony that the longer we wait to replace RIS, the bigger the price is getting, right? But part of that price, to be clear, working with a new system is sort of the easy part. The very difficult part is getting the data out of the old system, which isn't well documented. And that transition is really, in my opinion, the lion's share of what a vendor is going to charge us for. Is to go in and get that data, get it transformed, get it put in. So now that we're in a new system, so if we fast forward 7 years from now, we're on a new RIS system, that data is now formatted in a more appropriate manner and it's maintained in that manner, right? So when it's time to either look for a new RIS system in 10 years or to just continue to upgrade the system we have, it's a much smoother process. And that's due to the maturation of data management, which I'm sure we all know that's gotten better over the years, right? We can search for things now that we couldn't search 4 years ago.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Representative O'Hearn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Knopp, and maybe I'm missing something, and I think it was just covered with Chairman Burkhart. It's going to take around 10 years for you guys to amass the 80 million. I think I remember in a previous interim committee meeting that it costs approximately 2 million or 3 million to keep the system running now. So after 10 years, you're going to have an excess of $5 million, it sounds like. What are you guys planning on doing with that? Or am I missing something?
Who wants to take that question? I'll ask that one.
Mr. Chairman.
Director Reiner.
Yeah, let me take that one. In fact, as we start walking through the bill, that's in the bill, but very clearly it's spelled out in the bill on page 2, line 17 down, that when we're complete with the build out, that we're required to report to you, the Joint Transportation Highways and Military Affairs Interim Committee, about and recommend the repeal or amendment of this section. And so that would be a decision that would be made once we reach that point. And so it can be repealed or amended whatever the will of the then serving Joint Military and Transportation Affairs Committee is.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Director.
Representative O'Hearn, follow up. Okay, so with that, and I'll ask maybe a pretty tough question. And that, you know, it was recently in the paper that the computer facility there west of Cheyenne is going to upgrade their system with a new supercomputer. And the numbers kicked around were 20 to 35 million for a computer system that, to me, could probably put a person on Mars and bring them back. How come this system is twice that amount of money? I have to go back to my constituents and explain that to them. So anybody want to volunteer for that one? Well, I guess I'll go with Director Knopf then.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I would offer for your consideration in this that we're talking about two different systems, one very specific purpose system in the in-car system.
Okay.
And while this is a specific system, this also has to do with that cost of transferring the information from the current system into the new system.
Okay.
And I've been involved with a number of upgrades similar to this, right, in different organizations. And that's the sticky part in almost every case, is getting the legacy data into the new system. And with in-car, my understanding of how the supercomputer is set up, and I'm a little old on this, right? I haven't been connected up to that for a while. And that is the supercomputer is purchased and it's implemented, and then the data scientists who work on it, they will program it to do the things they needed to do for that project, right? They'll get slices of time on that computer. So it's a different critter, right? We're comparing a sedan and a SUV. Would be my answer to that question. And I would go back to what Mr. Rossetti already testified to. The $80 million price tag at this moment is based on what has been happening in other states to implement successful systems. So that's sort of where that's coming from. We will see, what our price is going to be once that RFP is opened, but that's the best guess.
Director Reiner.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that answer from Director Knopf. He's right on. I think for me, as I've had to explain this, sort of the elevator speech is in that comparison would be, well, I would compare that to the hardware versus the entire project. And that's, because it's going from the old to the new, and it is complex, and there's some time involved. And it will never get easier.
Okay, thank you, Director. Director Knopf, a follow-up to that, about how much of the cost, or I guess to Director Reiner also, about how much of that cost is that transfer of data from the old system to the new?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have access to that breakdown. When I'm speaking to that, I'm speaking to my past experience in other projects. And I would tell you my past experience with similar projects, working with, as an example, an SAP or a student information system, that moving the legacy data in could be well over 50% of the initial cost, and sometimes more. It depends on how dirty the data is, how unorganized it is, and if they can even find it, right? And that's part of the work that MathTech has done for WYDOT on this, is to try and map out some of those data and how they're structured, but there's unfortunately still some unknown in how the system works right now.
Okay, Representative O'Hearn, then Representative Burt, then Representative Henderson. Representative O'Hearn?
I didn't have my hand up, Chairman Burke.
Oh,
sorry.
Okay, sorry. Okay, Representative Henderson. You're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I guess this is kind of a hard nut to crack. So I'm just going to ask the question about the elephant in the room here. And on the fiscal note, if it invites your attention to that, and under the assumptions, it says, quote, "It is unknown how much funding will be spent each year, but the department will award and pay," and so forth. Well, I don't want to waste time on that, but I want to say this, that we have folks out here who've already incurred a rise on their driver's license. They've already incurred, an increase to the registration fees. And we know that there are opportunities perhaps available in the area with regard like to the facility west of town or here. So I guess what I'm saying is was there any thought, or has there been any thought to putting funds away into an account pending the accomplishment of knowing exactly what it is it's going to cost us, and then also how we're going to build it and when and where and so forth. It just seems to me that we're just keep putting more and more money into this, trying to band-aid it as we go forward. And I don't mean any criticism by that. I'm just trying to speak frankly that, we have people out here, constituents that are contacting me and saying that they feel like we're nickel diming them. I mean, $5 doesn't sound like a lot, but $5 this year, $5 next year, on and on and on. And then we got to look at this fiscal note as they can and say, we don't know how much it's going to cost every year, how much it's going to spend. We got to nail this down somewhere. Thank you.
I was going to ask if there was a question in there somewhere, but Director Reiner.
Well, I can ask the questions. How are we going to nail this down so we know how much we're going to spend each year?
Director Reiner?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Henderson, let me take a crack at it, and one of my team can correct me. But here would be here's my perspective: is the RFP has not been accepted. Our goal is that we amortize this evenly out over 8 years, and so that's the goal: $8 million a year for 10 years. We don't know if somebody's going to accept that. And so Truth in Lending says, hey, I don't know for sure. That's our hope. But what you see in the fiscal note there is, hey, somebody could say, no, we're going to pay $10 million the first year, and then it's going to be $6 million. And then I've got to figure out how to manage that, which is my job. So that's the issue. And so in my mind, to the second part of your question about, how are we going to pay for this? This is how we're going to pay for it. I mean, it's time to start moving, and we're paying for it as we go. And so that would be our recommendation at this point, versus, putting money away, for the next 10 years. It will increase the cost significantly, and it'll just be harder to deal with 10 years from now.
Okay. Representative Byrd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, I truly don't envy your positions on trying to put a system like this in place, and of course make sure the technology is there for a future. But I need to go back a minute, and because Director Knopp, correct me if I'm wrong, your statement where it could be up to 50% of this funding projected could be towards moving the data from the old system to the new system. Am I wrong on that?
Director Knopf.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Burt, I was trying to share my past experience with other systems. What I don't know right now is if MathTech broke that down in their report or didn't. I can't speak to that. So I was trying to draw a line in the sand and say, okay, based on my past experiences with major systems, this is what I've seen.
Right, and I understand.
Representative.
That. Sorry, sir. I do apologize, Mr. Chairman. And Director, I get that. Not with the unknowns of the quality of the data, I can understand that you got to make a best educated guess with your past experience. But I believe it was Mr. Rossetti that said that they're projected to have 11 full-time, staffers to manage this entire system. But yet we're also looking at sending work to a vendor to change the data over. Are we trying to increase or develop a new office within the agency in order to cover this with the 11 with the 11 staffers dedicated to this system, and then yet still have a vendor to pay for to transfer the data? I'm not seeing how this is all working together.
Director Knopf or Mr. Rossetti, either.
Mr. Chair, I'll let Mr. Rossetti look at that from that earlier math tech report.
Mr. Rossetti?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it is complex, right? So what you're talking about with the state staff is really going to be those folks that are going to be here, you know, after the project is gone, right? So you've got to have people that are knowledgeable in what Wyoming does and what Wyoming's processes are. And then you've got to have some of the folks from Director Knopf's agency work hand in hand with your contractors as you're working through this thing. And in reality, what you're looking at is this isn't an ask to increase or create a new office within WYDOT. It's just an acknowledgement that as we go through this, we're going to have to pull people from our existing FTEs to focus on this, which could have implications to service delivery in other places. If you look at the way that the average implementation on something like this runs out, the implementation portion is 3 to 5 years. So that staffing concern is really just in that 3 to 5 year phase, right? And it doesn't have to necessarily be all 11 at once, Representative Burt. But during that time, the vendor is going to have their people working with that staff. So the vendor is going to have people in here as well. So that's kind of how that works is you got a vendor and that you have a core team of state employees that are here through the duration of the implementation. And then those guys kind of go back to their normal jobs at the state level, and the contractor then does the maintenance on this project going forward. So that's sort of the dynamic that we're looking for there. To speak to the earlier question, real quick, Director Knopf, the original math tech report, and that's been provided. We can certainly get it back out to the committee if they'd like. Again, the numbers have been updated and that won't be reflected in the report. But the implementation portion of this, as Director Knopf mentioned, as part of that original $68 million, the implementation estimate, which is some of what we're talking about here, was over $20 million. So it wasn't quite the half that Director Knopf was saying, but again, it was contemplated at a full third of the implementation of this cost. And again, that's a huge unknown because part of that has to do with ultimately what the vendor solution is and how our technologies mesh with that. But again, that's based on market research, market surveys, and what other states have experienced.
Thank you, Mr. Rossetti. And I hate to do this, but we're going to have to gavel in here in just a few minutes. So I will entertain a motion to table this, and this would be first up on our first meeting for the March session. And I would ask everyone to come back. And if we can't resolve it during our normal meeting, which would probably be a Tuesday, we'll carry it over on adjournment for the day. We'll get this done in one day. I apologize for that. I understand this is a very important issue and want to get it right going in. So with that, Representative Stiver.
I make a motion we table this till our February or March meetings.
Okay, thank you.
1 second.
Second, thank you. So we'll do that. I thank everyone for being here, and for the people who are, I guess we could say in the audience right now and are waiting to speak. I thank you for your time and look forward to hearing from you in March, when we will probably, the way I understand it now, be live in person in Cheyenne.